Welcome back. We're in the sixth seal, verses 12 and 13 of Revelations chapter 6. It says, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind." Looking at this, it's very hard to tell what's going on. We only have a few clues, but a whole lot of theories. One theory that my wife brought up, she heard at seminary, there was a guy in the class that said it could be nuclear bombs. John wouldn't have known to call them nuclear weapons or anything of that sort, so it's natural that he wouldn't have used the words. I'll give him that. Nor would the translators have known what to call it, because the word nuclear wasn't first used until the 1840s with the French word nucléaire. When I looked up the word nuclear, I was trying to find out, well, when did this word even come about? And it's 1800 years later. So with the release of a newer video game at the time of this recording, it was new when I was doing all this study, called Fallout 76, there was a science person named Kyle Hill. Love all his science stuff. He does a great job of explaining things. And he did an episode about nuclear blasts to see if theoretically that game could happen. Now, based upon his statements and explanation of the type of bombs needed to create the atmosphere of the game, even the smallest yield bombs would not create what John describes. The only people who would be able to witness such an event would be dead. Yet we see in the next verse that people survive it. Excuse me. So I dug a little deeper and found that there are 46 accounts of days between 1091 and 1971, and this is according to William Corliss, who is a physicist and chronicler of unexplained events, that the sun has turned black and the moon has shown red. There's 46 times over the last 100 or so years, almost 100 years, that this has occurred. And the best record of such an event for why that happened came from trees, oddly enough. Scientists found scorch rings burned into the tree's age for the time that it occurred. This would directly correlate to wildfires, specifically soot mixing with fog and or low-hanging clouds. So we see a few things that in John's description would match this as well. We see that stars will fall from heaven, and depending on how they hit, you would have soot and ash from the trees and any wood that was burning kicked up into the air. We see that it's compared to a fig tree shaken in a mighty wind, and this seems quite literal when you realize that the word for earthquake here is the same word translated storm and tempest in Matthew 8:24. The word earthquake also indicates, however, that there could be volcanic activity, which would add to the soot levels, and if it jettisons molten rock high enough into the air, it could theoretically look like stars falling from heaven. So based on John's description and understanding of the science of what causes the sun to turn black and the moon to turn red, there are two possible theories that are supported by John's description, and they may just as likely be both occurring as they could for just one of the two events occurring. It could be that there is a massive earthquake that triggers a volcanic eruption that shoots molten rock high into the air, the heat of which is so great that there are winds created and enough soot unleashed to mix with the fog and clouds in the area to tint the sun and moon. Could also be that there's a large enough meteorite activity, and I'm not talking about a large singular meteorite, but a lot of small clusters that would again create seismic shock waves over multiple areas, that the fire and impact create soot and the wind again carries it, mixing it in. It could be both meteorites and volcanoes, but the one problem with calling it nuclear activity, as we now have a word to describe that, is that the winds from even our smallest low-end yield bombs would carry the soot, to create this blackened sun and red moon effect, would also spread the radiation, and it would kill everybody. And then we wouldn't have people surviving that we're going to see in the next little bit. So there's a few theories. Unfortunately, we don't get a whole lot of evidence to describe it, because there's a lack of words there, and John just had to put it in there as best as he could. Verse 14. And again, we can put that on our time frame. It's going to have to occur after the fifth seal. And we'll tidy up this time frame as we get further in. But for right now, again, we're just kind of putting things in a rough area for the time frame, because we do have something that's going to help us actually make this tiny bit more accurate than just scribbles on a page. I promise you, it does actually start to make sense, but we only have a small piece of the evidence. Verse 14 says, "And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island removed out of their places." Now, the word depart